Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another episode of the strategy series. Just yesterday we did the video on how to counter Dark Broly, and today we'll be talking about how to counter Mecha Frieza. This deck is incredibly powerful. Doesn't seem like it's going to go anywhere for quite some time. It's probably the top yellow deck at this moment. I don't think that's really arguable. So we will talk about how to counter it today. If you guys are new here, definitely subscribe. Hit that bell to miss a video. If you guys want to help support the channel, there are many ways down in the description to do so. If you want to compete in events where information like this is going to be highly relevant, make sure to check out the Patreon down in the description below. I post competitive articles on there. It will help you get your game up. That being said, let's get started. We always talk about the deck and what it's trying to do before we get into how to counter it. So Mecha Frieza really breathed some new life into yellow, and I did make a comment in a podcast last week that I actually thought Mecha Frieza would kind of taper off in power, because in a lot of cases the deck is fragile, and that's one of the things we'll talk about with how to counter it, how to exploit it. But the deck actually just took a lot of slots in the last top 8 of the Super Players Online tournament, and it's been topping since set 12 started, so I think it will consistently remain in the top cut and be one of the top decks. One of the reasons it's so good is its ceiling is so high. Being able to activate extra cards for free, I mean, if you played during the OG Mecha format, you know how good this leader is compared to that. That leader was all around free. This leader does have some restrictions, but again, being able to activate powerful extra cards for free is very, very good. A few things to worry about here. Metacooler, Mechanical Contempt. Besides this card, the deck does have a lot of inherent draw power, but the Mechanical Cooler does add a lot to that draw power. Plus, it gives the deck the ability to rejuvenate, so even though Mecha Frieza is ripping its life, it can replace that life relatively easily, at least once or maybe even twice in the late game, so it can continue to gain advantage by taking life. There is the Lord Slug Super Namekian engine. Some builds contain this and some builds do not. I think that in the format we're kind of moving towards, I think more mecha builds will actually adopt the Slug engine, because it is really good against Rogue. It wasn't so great against Red Broly and Dark Broly, but now that more Rogue is seeming to do better and better in the set 12 environment as the weeks progress, I think more lists will actually go back to playing the Lord Slug Super Namekian engine, so we'll talk about how to counter that. And of course, the top end, or one of the main top ends of Mecha Frieza, is going to be Celezino. Most builds will play this card if they have access to it. We'll talk about how to counter that as well. And the one card you do gotta watch out for, it is limited to 1 on the Dragon Ball Super ban list, and that is Cold Bloodlust. It's a weird one because, again, it is a one-of. It's almost like a secondary SCR in Mecha Frieza. So, do you play around it? I mean, there are still really powerful battle cards you can play that are sometimes going to be affected by Cold Bloodlust. Do you account for them having the Cold Bloodlust and just play scared the entire time? I wouldn't really advise it. Yeah, it could suck if you're going for like a Frieza charismatic villain or some type of a big play and they Cold Bloodlust it, but honestly, once they burn the one Cold Bloodlust, you don't have to worry about it for the rest of the game. I wouldn't really recommend like being too afraid of it, because sometimes you just got to play the battle card and see what Mecha can do in response. And that's one of the things about Mecha, is that they just have responses for everything. That is another one of the reasons why the deck is so powerful. It can answer just about anything in the game, which is definitely a really good thing the deck has going for it. Next up, though, we will talk about specific cards and strategies that help counteract Mecha Frieza. But realistically, there's a playstyle preference that overall does the job, and here's what I'll explain. So, Universe 9 Assemble, like I mentioned a second ago, is one of the main draw engines of Mecha Frieza. Basically, when you activate this for 1 on Mecha's unawakened side and for 0 on their awakened side, you always draw 2, but then if your opponent's energy is all tapped, you play a Universe 9 battle card from the deck. This card provides so much value in Mecha Frieza, it's honestly kind of absurd. But one of the main ways to play around Mecha Frieza is to not end your turns tapped out. And the thing with this kind of strategy is, not every deck can do this effectively, right? So Red Broly, for instance, if you have any turn where you don't spend the majority of your energy, especially turn 1, it's very, very important just to start the game with your turn 1 play in Red Broly. You kind of have to do that, so you kind of automatically fall prey to Universe 9 Assemble. But Dark Broly, for instance, you can play many of your turns tapping 0 energy. You do not have to have a turn 1 play. You can just make a 1 energy play on turn 2 and keep 1 energy open to not, allow them to get the full benefits of U9 Assemble. So, take a look at the deck you're playing, determine how important the turn 1 play is, and if it's not all that important, consider not making a turn 1 play. Consider that if your deck can get away with doing that. Again, some builds, some decks have to have their turn 1 play to get the ball going, and that's okay. But if your deck can spend most of its turns by not completely tapping out, that will actually help you a lot against Unite Assemble, gaining them crazy amounts of advantage. Another card I want to talk about in terms of just how to play against Mecha Frieza, Bergamo Ferocious Roar. This is just one of many cards that Mecha Frieza uses to very heavily punish misplays. And it doesn't always be a misplay. Like, there's sometimes your board state is just in a situation where Mecha can take advantage of it, and that's really a rule for yellow in general. But there are certain things you can do. Like, for example, if you really want to play around Nimbus, don't attack with your leader first. Attack with battle cards first. If you want to play around Zamasa Super Combo, gets a little bit trickier, but if you already have an established board, probably attack with your leader first so you get that leader draw. There are just many things like that where you kind of have to gauge your opponent, see what they have access to. Like, for example, before at the start of your turn, you charge, you draw, you reset all your stuff. Look at how much energy they have open. If they only have one energy open, then you know you're safe from Bergamo Ferocious Roar, so you don't have to worry about it. But if they have 2 or 3 energy open, or even access to their Awaken, you do have to keep in mind that, wow, Bergamo Ferocious Roar can come down, tap my battle cards and or my energy. Same thing with like Raiders Warcry. You have to watch out, like, attacking leader first if they're going to Raiders Warcry you. Now, of course, like, if they have 2 or 3 energy open, it's going to be really hard to kind of, you know, take a look and say, hey, are they going to Nimbus? Are they going to Zamasa Super Combo into Bergamo? You kind of can't predict it because they do have a lot of options, but you have to wage what you're playing, the deck and strategy you're playing, and which of those things hurts you the most. Maybe you can't deal with a 20k double striker on turn 2. Maybe you really want to prevent them from playing it for maximum value. You kind of have to think about things like that as you're playing against Mecha Frieza. Those are kind of just like strategy and more abstract thoughts for how to play against Mecha Frieza. But anyways, we will go on to some more specific strategies. So talking about the Lord Slug engine, this is a 20k battle card with barrier. So what are we going to look at? We're going to look at different cards that answer barrier. In red, one of the top staples for that is going to be Kaioken Goku Concentrated Destruction. The activate main here is going to be our main culprit. And then in yellow, so like if you're playing a Mecha Mirror or a different yellow deck like Whis maybe, you have Vegeta striving to be the best, which is really nice because it only costs 1. You do have to play it for 2, but it will untap one of your energy after it KOs a battle card barrier. And then for every color, there is a string of these extra cards that cost 3, but also allow you to combo with them. So they're not just like dead extra cards in your hand. So for yellow, you have Justice Blast. For blue, you have Barrier of Hope. This one's a bit weird because it does put the opponent's card back into their hand, and with that, you know, in mind, they can replay the Slug relatively easily. But I know for instance, Marcus, my teammate Marcus has been a big fan of this card for answering cards like Slug. Even though it puts it back to their hand, they do lose a lot of tempo, and the draw 2 of Barrier of Hope is actually quite nice. Demonic Absorption, your option for black, you warp it ignoring barrier. There is another black card you could look at. I haven't really seen any decks playing this card, and I kind of understand why. I mean, to be honest, I haven't seen many black decks playing either of these cards, but these are cards you can look at. SS3 Vegeta Unstoppable Evolution. So you have a 6-drop Overwhelm 6, but it costs 2 black energy. So it does cost less energy than Demonic Absorption, so that's something to consider there. It does cost you probably your entire drop area on like a turn 2, turn 3, depending on what black deck you're playing. But it does draw you a card, it does put on a 25k attack, and it does, you know, remove a battle card ignoring barrier. Only problem is, again, that one of pesky Cold Bloodlust can hit this card, can prevent this thing from going off. And again, will they always have the one of? They won't always have it, but if they do have it and you need this thing to kill the Slug, you could be in a bit of trouble. So maybe for the 1 more energy, you just use Demonic Absorption. Artificial Impact, excellent card for green, KO something ignoring barrier, and pitch a card to their hand. Really, really good stuff. Next up, we have stuff to counter Celezino in the different colors. So we have Dirty Burst. This is a card that I think is super underplayed in blue. I mean, to be fair, blue is super underplayed right now in general. But Dirty Burst acts as a regular counter attack, but also as a counterplay for an additional blue energy. Draw 1, then your opponent can't attack with battle cards with energy cost of 7 or more for the turn. So you can use this in response to Celezino. Even though Celezino has Deflect, this just puts a lingering game state on the board so that you're able to just not allow Celezino to attack, right? Because it puts an effect on the player's actions, not on the card itself. Violent Ray is another great option. Violent Ray is a weird one because it's okay against Mecha. It's not amazing. First of all, Mecha and Yellow in general does have Swift Retaliation Cooler, but sometimes that card can be energy costly for them. But besides that, this card is okay because it does stop the Raiders Warcry attacks. It does stop the Bergamo Ferocious Roar attacks, but it also stops the Celezino attacks. So oftentimes, before they play the Celezino, they'll attack out with all their things they're going to sacrifice just to get more value out of them. So if you catch them on a Violent Raise, they're not going to be able to attack with that Celezino, which is going to be kind of similar to Dirty Burst there. And then Mutaito Skill of a Sage, again, if you're in yellow, maybe a Mecha Mirror, maybe you're playing Whis or something like that, Mutaito will tap down the Celezino. You will probably still lose 3 cards from your hand if they're playing it on turn 5, but it's better than, you know, straight up dying to the dual attack quad strike, right? Then we have some stuff to deal with their smaller battle cards on the board. So Mecha Frieza does spam a lot of 15k or lower battle cards. You have Basil, Ferocious, Fatal Rampage. You have Chapil the Iron Drake. You have a lot of smaller battle cards that they're playing, and these particular cards in red are amazing against them. Yamcha Merciless Barrage. This counterplay is not always great. Sometimes red decks just don't play it, but in this format in particular with Mecha Frieza and Red Broly to a degree, this card's actually quite good because when battle cards are being played by skills, you do this guy in window 2 and he gets a lot of value taking out 2 battle cards. Is that all you got? If you need to be a little bit more defensive with negates, this is a basically 2 card out to 2 15ks. Again, maybe a Basil that hasn't used Activate Main yet, and maybe like a Chapil the Iron Drake, or even maybe like a Slug 1-drop. Then we have God Sling Technique Trunks and Frieza Charismatic Villain. This is mostly going to be good for dealing with Bardock Raider's Warcry. So God Sling Technique Trunks pretty much acts like the Isekai Keeping Watch, the combo card that prevents them from using Warcry on you offensively, whereas God Sling just kind of works offensively and defensively. This is probably going to be your Warcry will probably be your best target for God Sling Technique Trunks if you're playing blue. Besides that, though, another good target to hit with this is the Bergamo Ferocious Roar, so they can't tap your energy or your battle cards. Frieza Charismatic Villain acts in much the same way, although this is not going to be great against Bergamo because Bergamo will still resolve its effect, but dealing with the Raiders Warcry with this card for 0 energy is going to be quite good. Also, you can use Frieza to interrupt their, you know, process of building into Celezino by sniping their biggest battle card or the battle card they may need to go into Celezino. And next up, guys, I want to just generally talk about aggro. From my experience, putting on a lot of pressure early against Mecha Frieza is really good. And it might be weird that I have Red Broly here, but I did talk about this in a Patreon article where I feel like I did find a way to combat Mecha Frieza pretty effectively. Even though it is perceived to be a bad matchup for Red Broly, I've had not really many problems against Mecha Frieza. Again, it comes back to what I was saying in the beginning of this video, where you have to actually sequence very, very properly. Mecha Frieza can take very big advantage of your misplays. So if you know how to sequence, if you know how to attack properly, even a deck like Red Broly, which many people say is a bad matchup against Mecha Frieza, you're going to be able to do okay. But then you have Majin Vegeta, the inherent double strike. Again, Mecha Frieza is a leader that has to take life to gain advantages. So if you're double striking them all the time, they are going to feel the pressure of that. And then Vegex, especially when you have a card like Goku True Fighting Spirit, that's going to punish them for activating counters. You're going to get a lot of value out of that. Plus, Vegex just is generically aggressive with the free play time agents and the different overwhelms you can play and things like that. But anyways, guys, that's what I got for you today. I do want to know in the comments below if you have any other tips or recommendations for your fellow Dragon Ball Super players about dealing with Mecha Frieza. Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.